Today is the 45th anniversary of the original Star Wars film from 1977, and just in 2 days, we'll be seeing a mini-series based off the very first Jedi that we saw, Obi-Wan Kenobi. So to celebrate the anniversary of this iconic film right here, I'm going to be talking about a show based off a character who only existed in that movie after he was digitally inserted to a scene that was not even present in the original cut. Hey everyone, it's Alexander, the real Mr. Robinson. Welcome to the channel, and this is my review for the Book of Boba Fett, which is a show based off everyone's favorite bounty hunter, Boba Fett. That actually might be debatable, but this character has been pretty popular ever since he first popped up in Empire Strikes Back. This series in particular, however, picks up right after the events of Mandalorian Season 2. Boba Fett and Fennec Shand have finished their agreement with Din Djarin to help him rescue Grogu. And if you saw the stinger for the Mandalorian Season 2, Boba Fett made his way back to Tatooine into Jabba the Hutt's palace, where he assassinated Bib Fortuna right there in Jabba's throne and pretty much took the throne for himself. So now he has become the new crime lord of Tatooine. He looks over the people of Mos Espa, but he's experiencing some complications as he tries to earn the respects of not only the people of Mos Espa, but the other crime lords that once served under Jabba the Hutt. Things get a lot more complicated, however, when it's revealed that the Pike Syndicate was promised control of Mos Espa after the death of Jabba the Hutt, something that Boba Fett will not tolerate, and is willing to fight to the end to maintain this land that he took himself. Boba Fett first appeared in The Empire Strikes Back in 1980. He only appeared in the original Star Wars movie because he was digitally inserted into the Jabba the Hutt sequence. Boba Fett was not conceptualized until the Star Wars Holiday Special, but he made his feature film debut in Empire Strikes Back. And ever since then, he has become super popular for simply looking cool. He didn't really do anything in Empire Strikes Back, and in Return of the Jedi, he kind of went out on a whimper. For anyone who doesn't know what has become of Boba Fett in the expanded universe before it became Legends after Disney got the franchise, it's really hard to be convinced that this character was an actual cool badass when he didn't really do anything in the 2 movies he was in. He then popped up in Attack of the Clones, where he was revealed to be the clone son of a bounty hunter named Jango Fett, who got a lot more cool shit to do in that movie alone, and he's made appearances throughout the Clone Wars. But it wasn't until Mandalorian Season 2 where everyone was convinced, alright, Boba Fett is actually a cool badass. And for a long time, people wanted to see a standalone Boba Fett show, or maybe even a movie. There was even one point where James Mangold was attached to direct a standalone Boba Fett movie. But after Solo, a Star Wars movie, bombed, that plan fell through. James Mangold is now directing Indiana Jones 5, and we got this show right here, which is headed up by Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, and Robert Rodriguez. And after watching the show and having several months to actually think about it, this is the prime example of the phrase, "Be careful what you wish for." Now, I was actually excited for this show when it was announced. Personally, I prefer Star Wars to do more original stuff and stay away from pre-established characters, but Boba Fett was a character that didn't really get a whole lot to do, so this was the perfect opportunity to have him shine. And there are some definite good moments in this show. For example, Temuera Morrison, he played Jango Fett in Attack of the Clones, and he was really good in that, but he plays Boba Fett in a different light. I also really like Ming-Na Wen as Fennec Shand. Ever since she popped up in Mandalorian Season 1, I thought it was such a waste to kill her off right there. But I'm glad they brought her back in not just Season 2, but also The Bad Batch. And she is pretty much to Boba Fett what Zam Wesell was to Jango Fett. But you can really tell by watching this show and just their overall dynamic that Boba Fett values Fennec Shand as a partner more than Jango Fett ever did to Zamwasel. I overall like how this show treated Boba Fett as a character. I heard a lot of people having issues with Boba Fett being soft in this series, which, him being a super badass who's unstoppable just seemed a little boring to me at points. I mean, sure, the reason that we all fell in love with Boba Fett is because he looks cool and he was mysterious, but I really do admire the attempt to make him an actual character rather than just some guy sitting in the background who does nothing. And they established that his life as a bounty hunter has been pretty stressful and he's never been treated with the respect that he quite frankly should have deserved, especially coming from the son of Jango Fett. And I really like what they do with Boba Fett as a character. There are some other really good things about this show, but unfortunately, a lot of the negatives outweigh the positives. And the biggest negative that I can give of this series is the structure of it. This is probably one of the most bizarrely structured shows or pieces of media I've ever witnessed. Sometimes movies and TV shows can be structured in a way to where they're interesting, like the original Superman movie. We don't really see Superman in costume until over an hour in, and we don't even see Christopher Reeve play Superman until a little before that. It's nearly a full hour before we see Christopher Reeve. And if you look at the original Godzilla, that's a movie where we get introduced to our two main characters and then they are gone from the movie for 10 minutes before they pop back up. Or hell, look at the original Star Wars. The beginning of that movie is told from the perspective of the droids, and then we're slowly introduced to Luke Skywalker and all the other main characters of the original trilogy. I have no problem with stories that are weirdly structured as long as they're interesting and they understand the path that they're going down. The Book of Boba Fett, unfortunately, feels like a mess and it's all over the place with its story and what it wants to do. There is a lot of flashback sequences in this show. Now, it doesn't go too far into the past. It mainly starts when Boba Fett gets out of the Sarlacc pit and then explains what he's been up to before we meet him in Mandalorian Season 2. He becomes a part of a Tusken Raider tribe. They eventually treat him as one of them. He earns their respect. He becomes part of the tribe, and it shows us how he met Fennec Shand. And those take up most of the first 4 episodes. We don't get a whole lot of time with Boba Fett in the present day after he's become the new Daimir. I honestly keep wanting to say Daimajin, but I know that's this guy right here, so I'm just gonna say Crime Lord. And honestly, the flashback sequences, while interesting and they're important to Boba Fett's growth as a character, to where he becomes a lot more humble and feels like he's found his place in the world, I would just rather prefer to stick to the present day. But even then, all the scenes in the present day have another problem, and that's that they're littered with red herrings. We are misdirected so many times on what's going on in the story and who the villain is. We start off with Jabba the Hutt's cousin that are 2 slug-like twins, and the way they sit right next to each other, I'm convinced that there's some inbred breeding going on right there. But anyway, moving past that, we're led to believe that these 2 are the villains, and they've got a Wookiee bounty hunter at their side, Chrysanthemum, who has previously popped up in Star Wars comics, and that's a clever way to introduce a character from literature into the movies and TV shows. But anyway, they established these 2 as the villains. Then in the next episode, Chrysanthemum is sent to assassinate Boba Fett. That plan fails, and then the twins show up to Boba Fett's palace and go, "Hey, sorry about that. Here's a Rancor. We'll just leave you be. Oh, and by the way, here are the real villains of the show." And you're just sitting there thinking to yourself, well, that was entirely pointless. And then once we get to the end of episode 4, we've come full circle. We're done with the flashback sequences. We've officially set up who the main villains are. We've set up the circumstances. Let's officially kick this show into high gear. I'm excited for it. And then the show goes, we interrupt the Book of Boba Fett to bring you the prologue to Mandalorian Season 3. Now, this is where I'm just absolutely confused and uncertain about how I feel about the show, because episode 5 is pretty much an episode of The Mandalorian. We catch up with Din Djarin and what he's been up to after having to leave Grogu, and it's overall an amazing episode. It's directed by Bryce Dallas Howard, and I I love her already, but I'm continually amazed at her ability as a director, and I'd love to see her direct a feature film soon, whether it's Star Wars or something completely original. But she does a great job with this episode. It's a lot of fun, it looks fantastic, and I didn't have a problem with this episode, because if they're gonna bring in Din Djarin to help Boba Fett with the Syndicate, then we gotta see what he's been up to. It was weird to have a full episode focused on him, but it didn't matter to me. I was loving it no matter what. However, I was a little concerned when at the end of the episode he said, "But first I need to see a little friend." And I was thinking, no. We do not need to focus on Grogu. We do not need to go back to Grogu. We do not need to go back to that creepy Luke Skywalker. We don't need to do that, and that's what episode 6 does. A lot of people really love this episode for the same reasons they love episode 5. I don't. I actually don't like this episode at all because, alright, the first time around, it being an episode of The Mandalorian, it's fine. Like, it's one episode, then we can get back to the main story. But in episode 6, we only focus on the main story of this actual show for 10 minutes. The rest of the episode is spent with Luke Skywalker teaching Grogu the ways of the Force and how to become a Jedi. We see the construction of his very first Jedi temple. Like, it's just, I don't know, it really distracts from the main story, and Boba Fett doesn't even speak in this episode. We see him and Din Djarin nod at each other and say, "What's up?" But Boba Fett does not have a speaking role at all. I mean, it was good to see Rosario Dawson back as Ahsoka Tano, and it was also good to see her interact with Luke Skywalker, and the effects on the young Luke Skywalker look much better this time around. But I'm still not okay with the fact that a machine is basically providing the voice work, because it makes Luke Skywalker feel very stilted in terms of his acting. I don't know. I didn't really care for this episode at all. And bringing in Cad Bane at the very end of the episode felt like it felt too late. Now, when I reviewed the Clone Wars back in 2020, I forgot to mention Cad Bane as a character. He first popped up in that show, and he popped up periodically throughout the series. He was always a cool-looking character, and it was really a joy to see him every time he pops up in the Clone Wars. And in his live-action debut, he looks great, and it's cool that Corey Burton's back to do the voice, but this character just came in way too late. He's never mentioned by name in this episode or episode 7. And it's also worth noting that episode 6 was directed by Dave Filoni. And it really has that feel of, this episode was made for hardcore fans. Cad Bane shows up, hardcore fans know exactly who he is. Anyone else? Hey, he's just a cool alien dude in a hat and a trench coat. I mean, it kind of works, but I don't know, it just, this episode was purely fan service, and it got a little tiresome. And it also ends like an episode of The Mandalorian, where Grogu is given a choice of, do you want to continue learning the ways of the Jedi, or do you want to return to Din Djarin, your father figure? And that's how the episode ends. And when we get to episode 7, that's ultimately where I realized, yeah, this show kind of sucks, because that conflict with Grogu is already answered after the titles pop up. Like, he decides to return back to Din Djarin, so we just threw away that entire emotional ending to Mandalorian Season 2, where Din Djarin and Grogu have to say goodbye to each other, and now they're back together. In a spin-off, no less. Why they decided to reunite them back together in a spin-off rather than the actual main series is baffling. I mean, we all knew Grogu was going to be back eventually because Grogu sells lots of toys. Like, that is a big merchandise seller right there for Disney. And there's no way in hell they're just going to let that story end right there. So it's very disappointing and almost inexcusable that they got these two back together almost immediately. And then as for the main story itself with episode 7, it's just nothing but action. And sometimes it's fun, but it also just goes on for so long. There are these giant droids with energy shields, and the action just goes on for too long that it almost becomes mind-numbing. Yeah, it starts off cool when Boba Fett and Din Djarin are flying around the air with jetpacks, shooting all the pikes, and when the mods come in and help out, and the people of Freetown show up. It's all cool at first, but it goes on for way too long, and it just gets to the point where it's boring. Even when you have Boba Fett riding a Rancor, who's tearing up these droids and climbing buildings like he's King Kong. As a giant monster movie fan, that should have worked for me, but for some reason it just didn't. I actually don't hate this episode because it is entertaining, but it's such a letdown to a series that was just utterly scatterbrained in terms of what it wanted to do. And it also gave some closure to the Boba Fett Cad Bane story, which is another piece of fan service, except this is even more of a deep cut because Boba Fett and Cad Bane actually dueled each other in a deleted episode of the Clone Wars. You can find it online as an animatic, but they finally decided to actually do it in this show. The problem with that, however, is that this is something that only fans will be invested in terms of their rivalry. And again, because they never once mention Cad Bane's name in this series, it ultimately means nothing to anybody who's not a hardcore Star Wars fan. And the decision to just kill him off right there, he's not dead. Like, you really think they're gonna introduce Cad Bane in live action for the first time and then just kill him off on the spot there? Of course they won't. It's just like Wilson Fisk's Kingpin in Hawkeye. He pops up at the very end of episode 5, then he's the main presence in episode 6, and they kind of allude to the idea that Maya Lopez just killed him right there, when we know that's not the case. And also, this franchise has a terrible addiction to killing off villains and then bringing them back soon after. They did it with Darth Maul, they did it with Boba Fett, they did it with Palpatine. Now, in my opinion, 2 of those 3 resurrections actually worked to the benefit of those characters. But we know they're gonna bring Cad Bane back at some point. He's not dead. This franchise is way too cowardly to just get rid of pre-existing characters altogether. Before I wrap things up, I guess I'll talk about the one thing that everyone, whether you like this show or not, seems to hate, and that's the mods. Basically, the mods are a group of young adults that have a bunch of mechanical parts showing. Like, there's this one girl who has a mechanical arm, but doesn't try to hide it up with skin, like Luke does after he got his arm chopped off. And there's a lot of other characters from this group that have a bunch of droid parts showing. And I actually don't hate the mods. I actually like them conceptually. There's a lot of people out there in the world that love showing off their tattoos, so let's have a group of people that just love showing off their droid parts. I actually had no problem with that at all. The problem I have with them in this particular show, though, is that they don't fit well in Tatooine. Tatooine essentially gives you Western vibes. It's run down, it's dirty, it's tough, and the mods just feel very out of place. If they were on Coruscant or any of the other core worlds, they would have worked, and I don't think people would have had any problems with them at all. But on Tatooine, they just feel very bizarre and out of place. And that's all I have to say. I have nothing else to add when it comes to the mods. As for the overall show itself, this could have been something really fun and really cool. But unfortunately, the structure is just kind of a mess. It made the show feel completely scatterbrained. And at the moment when we finally establish the main plot of the show and where it's going to go, it sidetracks to be a prologue to the next season of The Mandalorian. It completely ignores the main character of the show for 2 full episodes. And that finale is just nothing but action, and it got numb after a while. Yes, even though episode 5 is the best episode of the series, it almost is a backhanded compliment because it takes away focus from the main character of the show. So I don't hate it at the end of the day, but I can't give it a strong recommendation. Watch at your own risk. This is one of those series where if you haven't seen it, you might want to sit out on this for a while before actually giving it a shot. Let all the criticisms die down, just go into it with an open mind, and maybe you'll enjoy it. Maybe you'll look at all the criticisms that people have had about this show and go, hey, this isn't that bad. But honestly, out of all the Star Wars shows that have come out in Disney Plus, this was the first major letdown for me. In terms of everything that Lucasfilm has made ever since Disney acquired the franchise, This and The Rise of Skywalker were the biggest disappointments. Except I would rather rewatch The Book of Boba Fett 5 times before I ever rewatch The Rise of Skywalker. And there you go, that's my review for The Book of Boba Fett. I have no idea if this is going to continue with a season 2. If it does, I hope they maintain focus on the actual title character of the goddamn show. But yeah, we got Obi-Wan Kenobi coming out on May 27th. Again, I would prefer to see more original Star Wars shows that didn't involve pre-existing characters, but it'll be really cool to see Ewan McGregor back as Obi-Wan Kenobi. And it'll be interesting to see a Star Wars show that doesn't have Jon Favreau or Dave Filoni's involvement. As great as those two are, I'm excited to see what Deborah Chow has in store for this show. And speaking of May 27th, again, I have to remind people of this. I'm going to be at Star Wars Celebration. I will be making a vlog while I'm there. It's my first time going. But if you happen to see me at Star Wars Celebration, don't be afraid to say hi. But until then, I want to know what you guys think about the Book of Boba Fett. If you've seen it, what did you think? Whatever the case may be, let me know in the comments below. And until next time, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one. Hello everyone, I just wanted to say thank you all for watching my review for the Book of Boba Fett. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell button to get notifications. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, go check out my Twitch channel, and support me on Patreon. I'll see you guys in the next video, but until then, have a good day, and take care of yourselves.